Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's FCICA webinar, Recoat Resilient. This webinar will be recorded. The recorded session will be housed on the FCICA Member Center and this educational portal. Mark your calendars for these upcoming 2021 FCICA webinars. Join us Thursday, January 14, for Evolution of Wood Flooring Adhesives, presented by Sean Leahy with FCICA Corporation. On Thursday, February 11, join us for the why, what, and how of concrete moisture testing, presented by Jason Spangler, Wagner Meters. And on Thursday, February 18, join us for preparing the substrate and installation of flooring with EnviroStix polyacrylic adhesive, presented by Bill Weiss, Base King LLC. Visit FCICA.com to view and register for these webinars. FCICA has recently updated the safety book, Start with Safety. It is available electronically, free to members, and printed versions are available for $185. The safety book is an essential item to have in your office and on every job site. Purchase it on FCICA's website today. Welcome to the FCICA webinar. Thank you for joining us for Recoat Resilient, an educational webinar. We are pleased to have Dave Darche, National Market Manager, Adhesives A&D, and Wayne Highlander, Adhesives National Sales Manager for Bona US with us today. Speaker Dave Darche is the National Market Manager, Adhesives A&D, and has been in the wood flooring industry for over 35 years. He is a National Wood Flooring Association certified wood floor inspector and serves on the National Wood Flooring Association Architect and Design Committee. Speaker Wayne Highlander is the Bona Adhesives National Sales Manager. He is a second-generation hardwood floor contractor with over 30 years of experience on job site glue-down installations from large commercial work to residential. Wayne is NWFA certified in installation as well as sand and finish, and has been awarded the Vanguard degree, the Ambassador degree, and Advanced Craftsman degree. His background as an installer and flooring company owner gives a great perspective for finding solutions for the challenges faced by builders, contractors, and retail companies. Welcome, Dave and Wayne. We're excited to have you. I'm going to turn the controls over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave with Bona, and I'm joined by Wayne. Before I start the presentation, I just wanted to say thank you for attending today's presentation. I've been with Bona for the last 18 years. And I actually started using Bona products in 1985. So I like the fact that I do have some history, not only with the company, but also using many of their products. If I was doing this as a conventional CEU that architects or designers would attend, the learning objectives is a very important aspect of any continuing education unit. And since today's presentation is going to be a little less formal, we don't have to abide by all those rules and regulations. But when you think about a CEU, generally we are talking about benefits, process, differences between what has been done, what's being done in the future, and obviously the effect that this can have. So one of the things that I would like to start out by saying is that last year, Bona celebrated its 100-year anniversary. So the company has a very good history and heritage when it comes to coating solutions. Now, what's interesting, for those of you who don't know this, the name Bona in Swedish means to polish. And so for years, our coatings have been associated with wood floors. Well, 101 years later, we're not talking about wood floors today. And we're also telling you that there's no need to polish your floors. So I don't know if that's going to help me or hurt me as far as the corporate ladder is concerned, but we are going to talk about future of wood floors and the innovative ideas that are now reality. So one of the reasons why we're talking about resilient floors and linoleums and other types of sheet goods is because they represent a vast segment of the market. This is from the Catalina report from 2018, and I have 6 billion square feet up here. I lied, it's more like 7 billion square feet when you add in laminate. And the reason why this is so important is that there are a lot of floors out there that are constantly being stripped, polished, and maintained in order for them to have good usage, whether it's residential, commercial, educational, or healthcare. And I really did not know what else to call this slide, so I just called it the yuck factor. When we think about all the amount of stripper and polish that's being used and the eventual disposal of those products, there is a definite yuck factor to the equation. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight, now, please keep in mind, I've been in construction all my life. I understand that there is waste associated with renewing. There's no way to escape it. But the question is, can we cut down on that construction waste when it comes to treating, whether it's wood floors or whether it's resilient floors? I'd actually like to read something to you that was published earlier this year. This is from the IVL, Swedish Environmental Research Institute. And they make a really good comment that when you refinish a wood floor, there is a 78% carbon footprint reduction versus replacing a wood floor. And that when you refinish a resilient floor, there is a 92% reduction in carbon footprint versus replacing. And then the other thing that they comment on here is that there is a 90% savings in resources when you take into account transportation, electricity, consumables, and those other things. So I think that's important to consider. And as was mentioned, I'm on Bona's A&D side, and I do a lot of architectural presentations. And I will tell you this, unlike the movie The Graduate, where they said the future was plastics, I am seeing tremendous pushback on the A&D side, particularly with the younger generation of specifiers that are coming up. They have seen way too many visuals of sea turtles and birds with six-pack rings over their beaks, and or seeing the ocean of plastic that exists in the Pacific. There is a huge pushback. And for those of us who've been in the industry for a long time, we have to recognize that this is happening, it's in process, and what we can do to deal with it in a more sustainable message. So here's the problem. We have a lot of floors out there that, quite frankly, are disgusting, they're unhealthy, they don't look good, they are visually quite displeasing. What can we do about it? And the answer is we can change it. When you look at this illustration of a before and an after, if this was a learning environment, I believe this is some type of activity room, where are you going to get or have a feeling that you are in a better surrounding for learning or doing any kind of activity? Is it the photo on the left or is it the photo on the right? Whether we're in airports or commercial spaces, a level of hygiene, if this was important to us a year ago, it has become far more important to us in 2020. I was on a conference call recently, And one of my colleagues said, 2020 is a year that none of us are ever going to forget because we have all been through things that we have never experienced before. And it is going to change the way that we look at our surroundings on a daily basis. So, what can be done is instead of ripping out, throwing in the landfill, stripping, polishing, we have an opportunity to minimize the stripping process so that it is a one and done, and then transform that floor into something that will last for quite a while. And we're going to go through that process as we go through this presentation today. So whether it's a linoleum floor, and by the way, if you ever read about the history of linoleum, it's very, very interesting. It was developed during the American Civil War, the one that took place in the 1860s. And early in the 1900s, there were many companies that sold very durable linoleum floors. In fact, looking at some of the marketing pieces at the time, it would tell you that this was a floor for the life of the owner. Now we fast forward 100 years, and none of us has that warm, fuzzy feeling about these products. Well, if we have the ability to change them, they simply will last longer. And the same thing is true with rubber. There are a lot of rubber systems out there that are still functional, but maybe they are no longer aesthetically pleasing. And so we have the opportunity to deal with them. The same thing is true with VCT. As you saw on that earlier slide, there's a lot of VCT within the marketplace. What can we do to make it more pleasing? And the same thing is true with LVT, which also is a very significant element within the market. Same thing is true with PVC floors, and the same thing is also true with VAT. And we'll talk a little bit more about VAT as we go deeper into the presentation. Now, the system that I am describing you today works on many substrates, but there are a few that it does not work on. Now, we're in process of having it work on a couple of these substrates, but the ones that right now it is not designed for is stone, tile, marble, and granite. And I'll get a little bit more in depth in what's happening on the wood and the concrete side. So as you look at why we're considering this information today, we talked about the benefits. So before we talk about process, we want to talk about benefits. And these key benefits, I'm not going to read this to you. We've all sat through way too many presentations where someone reads that presentation to you. Everyone on this call today can read, but I just want to highlight sustainability, value, design, and durability. These are a lot of advantages. And once again, as I work with the A&D community, and I'm seeing not just the younger generation, but it's very refreshing to see older generation of A&D taking this to heart. I want to read something to you that came from the ASID resiliency report. This was only issued a month ago, so once again, I do need to read it. And the comment is this: the challenge to our industry, and they're talking about the A&D industry, is how do we better address human health and sustainability within the framework of resiliency and create spaces that reinforce the better social habits we now know we need. And I thought that was a very unique way of touching on this subject. The A&D community has always been a very forward-thinking group. And so, trust me, they are already looking at these types of systems to see how we can be sustainable, but also, once again, reinforce better social habits. So these are the benefits. You can see them for yourselves. But now let's talk a little bit about the process. And the process starts with preparation. And with this preparation, the first step is finding someone who looks forward to stripping wood floors. We know there's a lot of people who do it on a daily basis. I read one statistic that Walmart by themselves spends well over $1 million on floor stripper a year. But you have to find someone who wakes up in the morning and is excited to go ahead and strip that floor. Keep in mind that strippers have what's known as a dwell time. It needs to sit anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. You don't want it to dry out. And then you are able to begin the actual prep process, which is this. It is a wet scrub of the stripper to remove all the polish. Now keep in mind, the question that I get asked more than anything else, there's two, and I'm going to go into both of them at different points in the presentation, is how do I know I have all the polish off? Part of that answer is you should be able to see it with what you are pulling up off of the floor, but you never know whether there's 6 coats of polish or 30 coats of polish on a floor. But there's definitely ways of looking at the floor, seeing whether it is deglazed or whether it still has a degree of sheen to it. Or as Howard, who trained me, told me, if you coat or hit something 2 or 3 times, you know that you've at least hit it once. So this is a very important process, because what's interesting is that the finish that we're going to talk about for these resilient systems do have the ability to stick to polish. And on my side of Bona's business, on the wood floor side, we always talk about degrees of adhesion. And since the finish is able to stick to the polish, the question becomes, what is your degree of adhesion? Because as almost everyone on this call knows, is that your top coating is only as good as the bond of the coating underneath it to the substrate. The picture on the left-hand side is actually a very important component of this work. This multi-disc tool, coupled with 80 grit diamond abrasives, is absolutely critical in making this system work. These diamond abrasives microfracture the surface, and it creates all the sites that are needed for a mechanical bond to be able to take place. There are certain things that we do that serve as a chemical bond, and we'll talk about that when we do back-to-back coatings, but there are also requirements to be able to have a mechanical bond, and this particular tool is a very important element within that process. So after the floor has been stripped, the next thing to do is to remove all of that stripper, clean that floor off, get rid of all that detritus before you move on to the next process, which is cleaning the floor. Auto scrubbers can be used. I was talking to a colleague of mine who did a project recently, and a way that he found to be very effective is before he would mop off any of the existing leftover yuck, he would take squeegees and pull it to himself, and this now made the mopping process, which cleans that floor, a lot more easier to do and less sloppy for sure. Now, after that floor has dried, and keep in mind, I may mention it later, but just in case I don't mention it, once the floor has been mopped, you want it to dry for approximately 2 hours. The only caveat to that would be linoleum. Linoleum is an absorbent material. And so with a true linoleum, and because I know the word linoleum has become a very generic term, a true linoleum is an absorbent material. And so you need to allow that linoleum to dry longer than you would a sheet good or some of these other products that we're talking about. So now that the floor has been stripped and cleaned, this is the last time that floor will ever have to be stripped. And you can see the reduction in stripper use that this system will then accomplish. Now we get into our recoat process. And here's what it looks like. So even as you look at this photograph, you can see what they are covering over. And in most applications, one coat of color is all that you need to get rid of all this discoloration that exists underneath the existing floor. The only time where you may need to, if you look at that color, number 3 from the left, that fog color, if it was over a jet black tile, may require 2 coats of color, but in all likelihood, in most case scenarios, you are looking at 1 coat of coloration. Then the chipping process. The chipping is really designed to do a couple of things. It is a camouflage tool. It really hides some of the imperfections, which is probably why you are transforming that resilient floor to begin with. And so not only does the chipping add camouflage, but it also adds a very aesthetic look to the floor. If I mentioned before that if stripping was one of the most important considerations or that we get the most questions about, the chipping is maybe the second highest question that we get. And the reason why is this. Chipping is decorative. And so the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Some person might like a light chipping. Another customer may prefer a heavier chipping. So this will be one that as you gain experience, and it may only take 1 or 2 jobs before you get the hang of this, but it is a process that makes sense and really can go a long way in rejuvenating all kinds of different spaces. And then so after the floor is colored, and keep in mind that the chips are applied into that wet colorant, now after it is dried, you apply your finish. You apply 2 coats of clear coat in order to lock in that chip color so that now, instead of having to strip and polish that floor on a daily, weekly basis, you now have the ability to maybe every 2, 3, 5 years abrade that coating and then reapply the clear. No more need for chipping, no more need for cupping. I'm going to talk about slip resistance a little bit later, but these coatings, 2 coats over the color has a COF or coefficient of friction of 0.55. There are anti-slip properties that can be added to the colorant. If you do it in the first base coat of clear, you now have a COF of 7. If you decide to do it in both coats, you now have a COF of 9. So here are some of the quick facts. You can read these for yourself. I'll go into a little bit more depth. By the way, on the coverage of the color in clear, you're probably looking at closer to 500 and 600 square foot per pail. That's a lot of the feedback that we're getting from people doing the work. And as far as the cure rate, it is 90% cured after 3 days, and it is 100% cured anywhere from between 5 and 7 days after that. You know, unlike in coating a wood floor, if we want air movement, we always want not fans blowing on the freshly coated floor. We want the air to move away from the freshly coated floor. This is a little bit different. In a relatively quick time, we can turn fans on that floor to aid in the drying process. And as you can see, the chip coverage. By the way, if someone wants a very light chipping, it's around 400 to 500 square feet per pound. If they want a heavier chip, it's more like about 20. It's 2,500 feet if you want a light chipping. It's 500 feet if you want a heavier chipping. A little dyslexic on that one. And now we'll get into the cleaning. This slide is very interesting. This isn't something that one of our customers actually did this. They took all the different things that are being utilized in most commercial cleaning applications. And I can tell you this, hand sanitizer is ruining a lot of surfaces at this time. It's ubiquitous. I go into my local market basket, and the first thing that I see when I enter the store is the hand sanitizer, and I look at the flooring underneath, and it's doing a job on it. So one of our customers took all these different things, put them on the floor in full concentration, and let them dry for 7 hours. And after 7 hours, all of them had either completely dried or evaporated. Well, what was going to happen after it was dry? Well, they went in and cleaned it. And you can see from the larger photograph, and you can see from the more microscopic photo of this, that there were no visible effects from these wide range of chemicals damaging so many floors out in the marketplace today. Once again, this goes a long way in the sustainability of these surfaces. These next two slides for me were kind of very revealing. This was a new floor that part of the floor was not treated, whereas part of the floor was treated with the clear finish. And you can see the photo on the left. This is after 8 weeks. I can't read it, but I'm pretty sure it's 8 weeks. They did UV light, and you can see the contamination clearly shining through this new floor. Well, look at what happens when the new floor was coated with the clear. You can see a tremendous degree less of contamination. And right now, cross-contamination within the industry is a very important issue. If it was important before, it's becoming more important now. And what's interesting, this was a vinyl plank floor, and as they removed the planks and once again looked at what's going on underneath, you can see the photo on the left versus the photo on the right, that there is clearly less contaminants associated with the LVT that has been treated. This is an even more revealing photo. This was a photo on the left, same amount of time period, new floor, installed 6 coats of polish applied to the surface. 8 weeks later, UV light. Not only can you see it within the surface, but you are able to see it in between the seams. And while we all have the ability to clean the surface, quite frankly, we don't have the ability to clean in between the seams. And when we talk about microbes and germs and so forth. We know we can't kill them all right? But they are going to exist in places that we are not able to treat. Well, now look at the photo on the right. Same scenario, new floor, but treated with the clear coat. Now under ultraviolet ray, not only is there less visible germs on the surface or contamination, you're not seeing it in between the seams. So for me, this was really kind of an eye-opener when it comes to what these products can do, not only from restoring, but also making for a healthier floor for that school system, that home, that facility, and beyond. And with the polish world, there is a lot of slip and fall associated with polish. It happens on a regular basis. Once again, I can't read some of these statistics, but out of all of those 9 or 10 different things, many of them are slip related. Even if you don't fall, there are problems associated with slipping and not falling. So anytime we can minimize slip and fall, and once again, as I mentioned before, we have coefficient of friction that will meet ADA recommendations and guidelines, not only for assisted living, but even for ramps. So very, very practical use in so many varied applications. I'd like to tell you the story about this particular operating room. I believe it was in Las Vegas. You can see the picture on the left. And by the way, this was a birthing room. And I'm not going to get into the story I heard about this. But anyways, they had some slip and fall issues. And so instead of replacing the floor, they decided to redo it with this resilient system. I can tell you this, that they went in at, I believe it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By 5:30, they were done. By 10 o'clock the next morning, they were performing their next birthing procedure. And while they were doing the work between 1 and 5:30, the operating room next door was being used. And there was no smell associated with this process. One of my colleagues gave me some good feedback the other day. He did a section of our facility in Monroe, North Carolina, and he said that was one of the things that really surprised him, is he was kind of waiting for this objectionable odor, or even just an odor that he could notice, and it didn't happen. And so for him, it was a very pleasant surprise. And by the way, when it comes to OR costs, the average operating room charges anywhere from $36 to $37 a minute. So for an operating room, and you can extrapolate the math, it turns into over $50,000 a day. So for them, it was not so much the cost, but it was reducing that downtime. And I'll show you a slide a little bit later on that will go into depth a little bit more. This was a facility, medical facility in Providence, Rhode Island. This was actually where they stored all the medicines. So they did the area, but they didn't have to close off the wing of the hospital to do this medicinal station. They were able to come in, do this work. I forget whether this was a 3 or a 4 hour application, minimal downtime, but just look at the difference. Once again, not only in the surface, but the overall cleanliness of the facility. And trust me, if any of us have to go into a hospital, we want the cleanest surface possible for ourselves and our loved ones. And that's why we call this a game changer, because the transformation can really be tremendous. So this is what it looks like on downtime versus, restoration downtime. as well as versus replacing, which I'll go into the next one. Because once again, the minimal hours that are required combined with the minimal hours of downtime, as we already mentioned, the operating room costs are astronomical. But the same thing is true when it comes to the cost of replacing the floor. If you look at this study, and by the way, this particular hospital facility, they're the ones who gave this outline. These are the numbers that they came up with. And what a vast difference between retreating an existing floor versus replacing it. And if you look at this difference between 600 and 7,000, it's very much in harmony with that 92% reduction in recoating a resilient floor that the IVL Environmental Research Institute came with. So for me, this was a very interesting statistic. And now I'm just going to show you a couple of case studies, and then we'll get into the Q&A. But once again, there's a lot of diverse things and a lot of diverse facilities that you are able to transform. So whether it is a senior center that you can really brighten up. I'll tell you the story about this one. If you look at the photo on the left, you can see the doorway. It leads into a bathroom. That bathroom was an epoxy floor. And so obviously this VCT was installed over an epoxy floor. And you can't just re-pour epoxy over epoxy. You've got to grind it, you've got to shot blast it. And look at the spacing between this VCT. And I can tell you there's a lot of contaminants living in between every single one of these VCT tiles. So within 3 hours, what they were able to do was the system that I just explained to you. And now with this particular look, it reflected almost the original epoxy. I don't have a photograph of it on this presentation, but there's a picture of the existing epoxy and this, and it's a pretty good match. The problem with epoxies is over time, they do yellow, they do discolor. And once again, with this particular process, you are able to recoat it anywhere from 2, 3, 5 years, light abrade, new coat of clear coat, and that floor will continue to function. The reason why I chose this particular photo is not just the transformation. And by the way, once again, you can see the amount of seams between every single one of those VCTs. But with this system, you know, that color helps to roll in or fill in some of the seams, and the chipping adds to that camouflage. I want you to look at the photograph of the right of the decal. So you have a lot of not only school systems that can utilize their decals on the floor, but what we're seeing, particularly commercially, is that there are more requirements now for social distancing, you know, whether it's footprints, whether it's arrows, whether it's lines. This is a great way to be able to accomplish that without having to hang signs, put orange cones, pieces of blue tape on the floor. You now have the ability to do all this decal work, have it underneath the clear coats so that it becomes a permanent part of that facility. I think that can be a very good solution going forward. Another school entry. So remember I mentioned before that we can't go over concrete, we can't go over wood. I didn't exactly lie. We're still heavily testing. There's a lot of things that we like about what we're seeing over concrete. What we are concerned more than anything else with is with plasticizer migration. We know on a lot of concrete, particularly garages, you know, with the car parked on the concrete, that migration that might happen. But I would say by next year, since every surface requires different components for degrees of adhesion. Concrete is just a little bit different, but by next year, I see that we will have a coating for concrete. We have many high-level case studies that are going on out there, and we've seen a lot of encouraging success with the world of concrete. Just another VCT retail configuration. Most of what we're seeing done out there has to do with color, chipping, and then clear coat. Here was a medical office that didn't want the color for most of the area. They wanted the clear coat. So what they did was they cleaned it, and you can see how visibly cleaner the LVT on the right compares to the LVT on the left. And what they also wanted to do in that doorway section was to have a delineation of color, just to see what it would look like. And so that can be done as well. Laundromats. I haven't been in one for a while, thank goodness, but it was never a pleasant experience going into a dingy laundromat. It's probably still not a great experience having to go into one that has been successfully recoated, but it's at least a better experience than the one on the left. And then this hallway cafeteria, kind of an interesting story. You can see that there is a terrazzo border. So what they did was they colored, chipped that center, and then clear coated, including the terrazzo with adhesion. If you look at that right-hand photograph, you can see that the cafeteria is right there, and I can tell you there's a lot of spaghetti spills and things that happen right underneath that area where the students receive their food, and that whole floor is holding up very well. We talked earlier about VAT. With VAT, the diamond abrasives, as you know, cannot be used. You must follow EPA and OSHA guidelines for doing VAT. And this product can be used successfully over VAT, and you can see the cost savings between doing the two. I will tell you that just in the Chicago market alone, there's probably 9 million feet of VAT all existing. So we can either abate it at between $18 and $38 a square foot, or we can successfully recoat it. And this is an example of a recoated VAT floor that was followed with the guidelines of OSHA and EPA as far as covering what a transformation, what a better learning experience being in the classroom on the right versus the classroom on the left. And once again, I mentioned before, you don't do it on wood. Well, the interesting thing about VCT is the same in Boston as it is in Bermuda. And so we can treat it the same way. Wood flooring is different in Boise than Boston and Bermuda. So if you have a wood floor that is subject to wide swings of relative humidity, expansion and contraction, that might not be the wood floor to use this particular product on. But if you have an existing wood floor that you don't want to tear out, it's seasonably adjusted, that is a floor that can be successfully done. This is an interesting story. This is a Delta facility. It's the mechanics bathroom. And when it says it's an industrial bathroom, it's an industrial bathroom. These mechanics are covered in grease. Prior to this process being done, and this is over concrete as well, they were auto scrubbing this floor every single night. Now this floor, I believe it's in Minneapolis, now gets auto scrubbed every 4th evening. So once again, you see that reduction of chemicals being used because of this system being utilized. And this is another classroom, and why I have this one here is that this is not a doctored photo. Look at how much more light is reflected in this classroom than what it was before it being having the color, the chips, and the clear coat applied. And then you can see from an educational element what can be done to take an old drab middle school floor, which many of us remember playing on, and turning it into the vibrant facility that we see on the right. So certainly there's a lot that can be done with existing floors, and really a world of color, you have the opportunity to be as expressive and unique and individualized with these products that are existing. I will tell you that this system has been out in Europe for about 5 years. It's been in the North American market for a little bit over a year. The photograph on the left is from a facility in the UK. The photograph on the right is from Norway. But you can see that they have a lot more experience over there and have been able to do some very creative and imaginative facilities, once again, utilizing what has been existing. So not only is there a world of color, there is a world of possibilities. It's limitless. What is your imagination? You can do it with this particular project or products and really have a lasting impact, not only on what exists, but you can make a contribution to the next generation by let's minimize what we're putting in landfills, what's going down the drain, what slurries we are taking and disposing of, and what we are doing to contribute towards a happy and healthy space for whether it's a family, whether it's a commercial space, clients, educational, healthcare, world of possibilities. And with that, I am going to conclude the presentation. And now at this point, if there are any questions that have been typed into the chat, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thank you. If the audience has any questions or comments, please submit them in the question box on the left of your screen. We'll wait a moment and give people an opportunity to enter in their questions.
It's something I wanted to mention during the presentation. Rubber floors they're a little bit more difficult to clean than some of the LVPs that are out there. And in talking with several facility solutions companies and personnel, with that clear coat over rubber, it becomes much easier to clean than it ever was before.
I've got a question here. How difficult is the coating process?
So thank you for asking that, because that is something I wanted to touch on. For the easiest way to answer it is if you can paint a wall with a roller, this is even easier. And there's a unique thing I know that some of you on the call today are familiar with coating a wood floor. And when we coat a wood floor, we have a particular, muscle memory that we kind of know how to do it. This is a little bit different. It has a tendency to glide a little bit more than some of that surface tension that we experience when we roll a finish like Traffic HD on a floor. So that glide is a little unique when you first do it, but from an application point, once you get that little bit of muscle memory, you understand how you can successfully do it. That first job that you do, once you go through that process and that coating, you'll be able to be on repeat mode, because it will come pretty natural to you. But thank you for asking that because I did want to touch on that.
Next question is, how do we determine what our square foot costs will be?
So, as I was looking on the different strippers, and I know that strippers are, there's all kinds of strippers out there. A lot of them will not put what the square foot coverage is because everyone applies stripper a little bit different. Some are heavy, some are light, some are 1.4 dilutions, some are 1.10 dilutions. So it's very difficult. The stripper is actually the least amount of the cost. As far as the base coat works out to around 60 cents a square foot. The chips anywhere from 3 to 5 cents, and I'm kind of rounding up. And the two coats of finish are about 45 cents each. So you're looking at a cost, even with the stripper, of under $2 a square foot.
Okay, the next question is, what is the solvent base for the color and clear coat?
They're all water-based. I should have mentioned that too. But thank you for asking that.
Okay. Next question is, can we get a demo set up for this system?
So my colleague Wayne would like to weigh in on this. Wayne, unmute your microphone and say hi to everyone.
Yep, thank you, Dave. For sure. I mean, feel free. We are setting up demos for this, and you touched on a few things, Dave. I mean, really, it's a great solution for facilities. It touches on our sustainability and our cost and labor savings, and it's an exciting sales channel for a lot of contractors. You can reach out to me. My email address is wayne.highlander@bona.com. It's WAYNE.Highlander, HIGHLANDER @bona.com. I think our information will be here when we get this out to everybody that's been on this call. But absolutely, we are actually in the midst of doing demos as we speak. So.
Yeah, and it's funny when I was putting this presentation, when I get into the world of floor coatings and adhesives, I like really, diving into the minutia and making everything sound more complicated than it is. In putting this presentation together, I couldn't do that. It amazed me at how simple this process is, but not only the simplicity, but how beneficial it can be as well. And you've all heard the benefits of doing it. And once again, benefits are becoming more important to every single one of us. So these demonstrations that we'll be putting together, Bona facility solution managers are available to do these. Bona territory managers are able to do it. Bona adhesive specialists. We have a lot of boots on the ground, and we're looking forward to doing more of these demonstrations, these presentations. Is this something that you're going to do day in and day out? I don't know. I don't think so. But if you can add it to your arsenal of what you are able to provide your clients and your customers at this point, I think it's a very good add-on for your business.
Okay, we have just a couple more minutes left, but we have two more questions that just came in. So the next question is, how do you address damaged or curled vinyl tile prior to applying the system? And then thereafter, we have one more question. So again, okay. How do you address damaged or curled vinyl tile prior to applying this system?
So we have an epoxy in a tube available. So as long as it's not VAT, you are able to cut that area away, use this epoxy that dries in 3 minutes that will fill in that area. And then once again, between the color and the camouflage with the chips, you'll be able to repair that area. I believe next year we will introduce more of a rollable version versus a caulking gun solution to be able to take care of exactly those situations. Thank you for asking that.
Okay. And one final question. Is catalyst used with color or clear coat?
Catalyst is, this whole system is a 2K, whether it's color or clear.
Okay, that is it for the questions, everyone. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We've reached the top of the hour here, so we're running out of time. If there are more questions, anybody has, or any attendees have any further questions, you can certainly email me and I will forward them to Dave and Wayne. So on behalf of FCICA, thank you, Dave and Wayne, for presenting today's webinar. SIMs may now navigate to the Submit Credit tab to receive credit. Please note you must be signed into the educational platform for this feature to work. If you have any issues, please let me know. Again, this is the conclusion of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Dave and Wayne, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.